So, welcome to the third edition of the Global Ecovillage Network Online Summit. We're here today with Charles Eisenstein. My name is Evan Welkin, and I'm Jen's former communication director. And we're here today with Charles Eisenstein, who, if you've participated in some of our previous summits, you've seen him before. He's an author and thinker and has written Sacred Economics, The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible, and most recently, Climate, A New Story. And we're very happy to have him here today with us to speak a little to the themes that are important to us within the Ecovillage movement, as well as exploring where the conversation takes us. We're taking a slightly different format this year as we explore Ecovillage voices in tandem with some of the inspirational speakers who may or may not live in ecovillages. And so I actually wanted to lead with a question to you, Charles. We hosted our last summit in February of 2020, last year. And our host then, Kosha, asked each speaker to speak to when they feel despair and when they feel hope, and that was the leading question. And your response in that interview was to say that when you were in events with people as a speaker or as a sort of space holder, you frequently found moments or interactions or small situations that either offered you space for hope or despair, that there were these sort of simple moments. And I'm wondering, after the year we've all just lived through, whether you have further thoughts or reflections on hope or despair a year after we're into this new reality of the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Evan, for this great question, and thank you for hosting me again. And thank you to the Global Ecovillage Network, which is an organization dear to my heart, just because I know so many wonderful people from that event I attended in Sweden, and just from the movement. So I'm very honored to be part of it again. And in the last year, I've certainly gone through a lot of waves of both hope and despair. And I really can't diagnose it clearly, like what plunges me into one of those waves either way. I can say, though, that when I'm on the computer more, I tend to get more into the despair. And when I'm interacting with actual human beings, it lifts me up a little bit. And that's normal, I think. That's why solitary confinement is considered a form of torture, because we are relational beings. And the kind of relationship that we can get through Zoom, for example, it's kind of one-dimensional. Well, or two-dimensional out of many, many dimensions. I can hear you, I can see you, we can talk to each other. But there's a lot of things that cannot happen in a conversation like this. And especially if we're talking about, I don't even think we should call it a gathering, like an online gathering. That's an insult to the word gathering. You can't, like when I was in Sweden for the Global Ecovillage Network Summit that year, the best part of it, aside from my keynote speech, of course, was the random encounters, the little groups that form and disperse, the conversations that I overhear that draw me in. I am sure many people have this experience, like there's an organic a life to something that that's in place and that has multi-dimensional interactions. Like there's an element of synchronicity or serendipity that can come in that can't really come in when every aspect of the interaction is controlled and mediated by technology. So now I'm getting off another topic from your question, but I think it is related because it is this spontaneous social aspect of life that, for me at least, provides and it's not like I want it all the time, but like I need that dimension of life to in order to be sane, let's say. So
I would say we
yeah,
all do. And I think that's the impulse that drives many people to found community, because they're seeking to still further deepen that relationship and connection. So I'm
yeah,
interested, because this has been a big theme of your work, this question of, the story of separation and fear versus the story of interbeing and connection. And I'm wondering if you,
yeah. Yeah, I do think that the whole eco-village movement is uh, driven by this impulse to recover lost dimensions of our beingness, lost ways of relating to each other, and of course to non-human beings. That's why it's called an eco-village and not just an intentional community. It recognizes that a whole, healthy, full human being cannot actually exist in isolation.
mm,
We need to have multiple ways both to receive, to be nourished, and to express, to give. And the modern infrastructure of life, the infrastructure of modern life, the single family home, the life in a box, the relationships mediated by markets and by technology, that does not meet either the need to receive all that we need or to express and give all that we can give. So, yeah, this ultimately comes down to, who am I? Am I a separate self in a world of other? And my health and well being depends on enforcing my boundaries against the world so that my integrity will not be breached. Is that what a human being is supposed to be? Or is it a fluid set of relationships? If you believe the latter, then you will understand why the urge to recreate community, to connect with others, to be in place in a multidimensional set of relationships is so strong.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think then within the Ecovillage network, we've sought to sort of articulate some shared dimensions of regeneration that we seek to articulate and perhaps name, but at the base, that holistic sense of connection and interbeing is what goes throughout and underlies that all. I think we'll get a little more into that in a minute. But before fully leaving this space of kind of where we were a year ago and where we are today, shortly also after the last summit, you published the Coronation, which really struck, I think, a nerve in many ways, or it's inspired folks shortly after we all went down into lockdown, and it's now in 20 some languages. I'm interested, a year on almost, kind of your thoughts and reflections about sort of the way in which I think you very quickly saw the situation of the pandemic as relating to so many of these themes that you've been exploring and discussing for years. And I'm curious, my sense is that really reached an even wider audience than perhaps some of your other work. And I'm curious about your thoughts and impressions of where that's
Mhm.
gone and what that's taken, what life that's
Yeah.
taken.
Uh, a lot of the things that I warned against in that essay have actually come true. One of the things is like, don't think that this is just going to go back to normal uh, after we have flattened the curve in a month, in 2 months, because the reasons that we are implementing all of these measures of lockdown, distancing, and masks, those are the three main things, will never go away. As long as we think that the minimization of risk, the the um, the narrow view of health as death postponement, as long as we hold those things sacred, then we're not going to, there's always going to be a reason. Like if it's not, COVID-19, it could be a variant, it could be a mutation, it could be another virus. Like the common cold kills tens of thousands of people every year already. Like there's always going to be a reason to to continue living in this increasingly distanced way. And also, I pointed out that actually none of the things that are happening under COVID are new. Social distancing has been going on for a long time, slowly gathering momentum as more and more of life migrates onto social media. The kinds of interactions that we had, I mean, online gatherings didn't all of a sudden appear in 2020. Neither did online education, neither did online shopping, uh, neither did online dating. I mean, like more and more of life, so it just accelerated a pre-existing trend. And that way of life is profoundly dispiriting and disheartening and vacuous. And so now we're seeing some of the results in like a terrible mental health crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, again, like everything that eco-villages, well, not everything, but many things that eco-villages stand for uh, are in direct opposition to what we're supposed to do under the current public health regime. Like the way of life now is that you stay indoors, you avoid other people, you live a private, separated, sequestered life. That's not the founding vision of any eco-village that I know of. So this is part of the message I want to give to the eco-village community, is to hold your values sacred. It is important to be able to gather with each other. Is it more important than preventing death? That's not the right question, because it's a relative question. Like if we were even in the Black Death that were killing 90% of the people who were infected with it, then yeah, stay indoors, stay away from other people. What if it's a disease that could kill one person? Should we shut down all gathering for that? Nobody would say that. Well, this is somewhere in between. So if but if we don't hold the value of togetherness, the value of seeing each other's faces, you know, instead of having a faceless, literally faceless society. If we don't hold the value of singing together, of group hugs, of sitting in circle, like if we don't hold those as sacred, then when somebody says, well, you should stop doing that because it'll save, the lives of 0.1% of the population, you'll have no answer, because life is sacred. Like that's another sacred thing, is 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 life, protecting the vulnerable. That is sacred too, but it's not the only sacred thing.
Sure.
And we're seeing the results now of of structuring society in a way that holds that sacred, but not the other things that are the motivators of intentional communities and eco-villages.
And it also, I mean, it seems that the dichotomy we may create about we're either saving lives or hugging each other, even itself is a false dichotomy, in the sense that um, we may find other ways of connecting, of building community, even offline, even respecting. We may create pods, for example. Many people in this last year have created alternative means of sort of reducing exposure, but also maintaining some sense of intimacy and connection with others that they care about and love. I I appreciated that, the image you shared there, which touches on other parts of your work, is that we're kind of at this crossroads of deciding to kind of continue down a path of further separation and these black and white
Yeah.
dichotomies or otherwise.
And just to add like another like ironic note to it, all of the things that we are doing in the name of health, in the end, don't make us healthier. Like cutting ourselves off from the microbial world
Mhm.
through, filtering our air and washing our hands all the time and not contacting other people. In the long run, that's not going to make you healthier.
Mhm.
Health requires a healthy body ecology. It requires, again, relationships with the biological world. So we might see, oh, less infectious disease, but more chronic disease, more autoimmune disease, more allergies. Again, these are trends that are decades in the making and are potentially accelerating in the time of COVID. So, yeah, even that which we are attempting with all of these measures is going to be forever out of reach because this is the general principle. Well being does not come through separation and control, it comes through relationship, not to mention the impact of social relationships on health. That's the
Absolutely.
biggest indicator of the biggest predictor of chronic disease is whether you have robust social relationships. You're better off drinking and smoking and having a social life than you are, uh, you know, being isolated uh, and living a pure lifestyle,
Absolutely.
statistically speaking. Yeah.
Sure, sure, sure. Well, and I really appreciated the image you share also in the a new story about how really the organs of our system, using this body metaphor, the ecosystems around the planet are the organs of the living body of Gaia. And so in the same way that we may be doing this on a public health level with humans, this also relates to how we're interacting and connecting with the planet around us, and that perhaps we've been asking some of the wrong questions there as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, this gets into the territory of my book on climate, where I say we're putting way too much weight on carbon emissions and overlooking the organismic dimension of Gaia, of our living planet, in which the forests, the wetlands, the oceans, the mangroves, the soil, these are all organs. And if we could cut emissions to zero, and adopt, you know, Bill Gates' plan to bleach the sky white to reflect sunlight, and we, install carbon sucking machines all over the place, and yet we got those emissions down to zero. But if we continue to degrade the organs of this planet, it will still die of organ failure. We might not have, it might not be warming, it might
Mm,
be cooling, it might be increasingly deranged fluctuations, which actually we're already seeing.
mm,
We're seeing all this year, there's been record cold all over the place and record heat amid a trend of very slow warming, like much slower than any of the models were predicting. And we were supposed to have no ice cap by now, and sea levels inundating Manhattan. That didn't happen, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a crisis. But it means maybe, according to my view, that the crisis is different in nature from what we have believed, that it's a matter of approaching organ failure, which again speaks to the Ecovillage community that says we're going to take care of a place. We're going to recognize this place as alive. It's not just a matter of smarter techniques. It's a matter of relationship to a piece of land, to a place, holding it sacred, holding it in respect, learning about it, communicating with it over time through just very mundane practices. What works here? Let's try it. Let's observe. Let's learn from our mistakes. coming into relationship with a place, re-indigenizing ourselves. I mean, indigenous means of a place, right? This is a long-term project, and it is a step toward reclaiming the proper human relationship to the planet, which is not an exploitative relationship where we can continue to ruin and destroy and exploit as long as we keep CO2 levels at a certain level. No, that's not why we're here. We're here to serve life. And that right now, that means to restore the damage that's been done. So the eco-village in this regenerative paradigm that you mentioned is doing that. It's really aligned with my, whether it's my diagnosis of the ecological crisis as a crisis of the organs and tissues of Gaia. It's very much aligned with that because it's bringing health back to either preserving the health of places that are relatively undisturbed or bringing health back to places that have been damaged, strengthening the organs so that the whole planet, whether we cut carbon emissions or not, becomes more resilient.
Absolutely. And perhaps through this deeper ecological connection, we then also are better able to see the interconnection between other areas of regeneration that are needed or that are unhealthy and need healing and support. I mean, we were talking about social implications as well earlier. The social dimension also being really important in the eco-village context. I know you speak a lot about how we need to grieve and heal from trauma in order to kind of live into a story of love. And I can speak for myself as an eco-villager. This last year, we live in intimate contact with folks who are all living through this very challenging time. And it's been quite challenging to all the emotions and pain and past traumas even that come up in these kinds of major global events. We're not immune here. Yeah. And in fact, even in trying to connect with nature or build more just and supportive relationships in a small community context, it's not simple. I'm wondering if you have further thoughts about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's not like some add-on and okay, suck it up because we're, healing the earth here. Like the dimension of social healing is inextricably linked to ecological healing. On a very practical level, like how much work are you going to be able to do on the land if you're fighting each other all the time? If you're, paralyzed by your conflicts, you're not going to get very much done. But on a deeper level, because we are actually part of the earth, and as we settle into place-based community, we become more part of the earth. The earth feels everything that's happening in the human realm, and there's a connection there. And in fact, sometimes the local animals or plants might demonstrate to you and put in very obvious form a reflection of some kind of disharmony in the community. This is not magico-religious thinking. Or maybe it is. Maybe we should embrace magico-religious thinking. I mean, this is a basic principle of non-separation. Not that I am one with the land, although you could think of it that way, but is that we mirror each other. We are connected on the most intimate level. So when that healing work is done socially, the healing of trauma, the healing of relationship, then the land flourishes too. And this is, in a way, the hardest work. And sometimes it seems like the community gets bogged down in, conflict resolution and like there is also something to be said for, okay, and now let's get to work. But these are both, two sides of the same coin. And I don't think one can be neglected without harming the other one. I mean, I was actually just in an eco-village in Brazil. I went on a kind of a pilgrimage to some places in Brazil. And, in this one, a spiritually oriented community, Source Temple, it's called. And they spend 4 or 5 hours a day in direct hands-on labor, making the land beautiful, taking care of the buildings, taking care of the animals, and so forth. And a lot of the other, but every day also, like, I mean, what is really occupying a lot of their energy is each other. And that's how it's supposed to be. Human beings, we groom each other. We socially groom each other. We share stories about each other. We confront each other when we've deviated from who we really are, ideally. Um, so yeah, and again, this is something that it's a need that can't easily be met online.
Yeah.
The kind of interaction you see on social media is so far from what some of the more highly developed ecovillages in these terms, like Source
It's a
Temple.
different kind of grooming.
Yeah, like this kind of, it's just so far removed from that. And in a way, and it seems like it's worsened. This poisonous public atmosphere has worsened in the last year. So again, just it's showing us clearly where we've been headed. It's like fast forwarding to a dystopian future and asking us, do you really want that? Do you really want a world where we never congregate anymore? Do you really want a world where we're totally dependent on technology? Do you really want a world where well, I can go on and on, but we're being, as you said, a crossroads. We're being asked, what future shall we choose? Here's your choice. And I'm grateful for the Ecovillage community for staking out a choice that I believe is in the right direction.
Absolutely. I mean, we aspire that way. I when you touch on how much time that we spend in an eco-village context working on the social and even ecological care, one of the criticisms I know often is that can be kind of self-referential, or perhaps not always then go beyond our own context. And I really see the economic dimension of regeneration as an opportunity for us to redefine exchange, and particularly in the context of sacred economics and the thoughts that I know you've considered in this way. How can we reinvent economy beyond the wealth building of online giants as we've done in this last year towards a new model?
Yeah. So I think that the first thing is to get away from exchange as the defining concept of economic life. Exchange, that happens when you're dealing with somebody who's distant from you in some way. But in a tight community, it's not about exchange. It's about gift. It's about gratitude. It's about obligation. It's about the ties that are created when you help somebody in your community, when you give to the community. So, like, I might be the guy in the community that fixes everybody's roofs, and appliances, and it's like I'm really good with fixing things, which is actually the opposite of what is true in my case. But maybe I'm that guy, and it's not like every time I go to your house and fix your stove that you do something for me in return. In fact, you might never do anything for me in return. But because you see my generosity, then you know that it's up to you to be generous too in the way that you're able to. So maybe you help somebody else in some other way. Maybe you help that person, but maybe other people in the community in some other way. Maybe, you're really good with kids and you teach them music. And it's not like people are going to exchange something bartering for that service.
Sure.
But it's a situation where everybody's contribution is visible. And this leads to the other thing I wanted to say about getting bogged down, how an intentional community can get kind of bogged down and self-referential and stuck in their own patterns and endlessly processing and so forth. That happens when there is not a devotion to service, which could be a religiously oriented community, uh, there has to be some ideal, something that people are in service to, uh, a consciousness of service that maybe starts with one thing and then expands to include everything. Service to each other, service to the land, service to the buildings. One thing I was most impressed with at Source Temple was the beauty of the buildings, which were all hand constructed. Luckily, they don't have building codes in Brazil because they would all be illegal otherwise. But like every door, handcrafted, every window, handcrafted, and done with care, done with how do we make this beautiful? Like that's an aspect of service, of devotion, and that's what creates the crucible that prevents you from getting stuck. Because like you can't stay self-absorbed if you're in service to something.
Hmm.
And so like if they're, I think that the communities that fall apart are ones where people have lost touch with the um, element of devotion.
And that's what we would consider our cultural dimension of regeneration, that
Hmm.
we're focusing on creativity, art, a worldview that could include a higher purpose, a spirituality that helps us sort of tap into something larger, which may have, as we've flowed through here, stem from ecological connection, social inspiration, you know, going beyond the sense of sort of simple exchange within an economic dimension. Um, I wonder, frequently we think of kind of spirituality. I mean, I'm increasingly in this narrative of separation, spirituality or, religious or higher purpose consideration has been considered this further source of separation. It's sort of often pointed to as a um, a place where we increasingly say, "Well, I'm this and they're that." How can we? Um, I appreciate your idea of service as perhaps an invitation into exploring, seeing this in a different way, even in the way in which we build things. Um, but how might we design, at this period of crossroads, how might we design a more regenerative cultural dimension in our lives, even if we're not living in community?
Yeah, there's a million answers to that question, that each one of which is specific to the circumstances of each person. And that answer will become clear as you accept that you are here to serve life and beauty on earth. And then whatever expression that takes becomes more clear in your own circumstances. Because I've seen, different things work in for different people and for different eco villages too.
Certainly. Yeah, I know
So
you're
that's the
reluctant to be prescriptive, for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, it's
But
because if I were
perhaps even in your
prescriptive,
own life, in these
yeah, it
times,
would be the wrong answer. Yeah, for me, it's not about design so much.
Okay.
The next step only becomes apparent after I've taken the previous step.
Mm. Emergence.
Yeah. And this thing about, spirituality, like it can become a trap too when it is sequestered off from materiality and seen as a separate realm. But like, what does that word even mean, spirituality? Really, it's about um, transcending the given. Um, and whether it's the way we see the world, the way we see ourselves, it's about it's a developmental process of expanding beyond where you've been in right timing. So it's not about rejecting where we have been, but it's about recognizing what's next. There's something more than what I had accepted as real and what I had accepted as me. So the current connotation of spirituality as something like unscientific or non-material, that is a side effect of the dominant view of materiality, which is force-based causality, which is reductionism, which is separation. And that leaves actually a lot out of materiality, which we've exported onto spirit, but it's all one. There's not some separate realm. So another aspect of that is, why are we here? What is a human being? The answer given by capitalism is that you are here, and by Darwinian biology, is that you are here to maximize your self-interest. So spirituality then is anything that offers a bigger answer, a next answer. And in the, um, what we're talking about here is that it is about service. I am not here to maximize my self-interest. I am here to contribute beauty and life to the world. I am here to give. And yes, I need to receive in order to be able to give. But the purpose of my giving is not so that I receive.
Absolutely.
It's not a bargain. It's an expression of who I am. So that could be called spirituality also. So whether you call it that or not, there has to be something that calls us into development. And then we can say that that is a spiritual community.
Excellent. I want to touch on this question of design, sort of, and emergence. Is it possible? Because we see within the Ecovillage movement these dimensions interrelating, and that as we've discussed, that ecology and culture and social and economic dimensions all then integrate within a holistic design, which is ready and ripe for emergence and evolves over time. I mean, I think just as you're now, this is your fourth time with us in 5 years at an Ecovillage summit of sorts. That the conversation has evolved even over the course of these times that we've spoken. I wonder, I think many of us right now are asking big questions, perhaps even more of us than a year ago. How can we, what are some thoughts you might have about how we can involve that conversation together in a sort of holistic way?
About design?
Yeah, rather than as a prescriptive approach to interbeing, how can we perhaps support this emergence as eco-villagers, but also perhaps people interested in some of these questions we explore within eco-villages?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that you should never design anything and just always open to the spontaneous emergence, but it's to see design within a larger process, and to know that any design that you come up with is part of a bigger design that's beyond your understanding. So that whether or not you are designing something, to be aware that there is a design that you can participate in. You're, say, okay, you come up with all these principles, and these social forms, and here's my eco-village, I'm going to plan it all out to begin with. And it's going to work because I've thought of everything. No, you haven't thought of everything. And if you hold on to that design too tightly, then it's going to become dysfunctional very quickly. It has to be alive. You have to be able to let go of it. You have to be able to grow. And anytime you grow, there's going to be something that is lost too. So a design or an attempt to implement a design can be part of a conversation with the larger design, or with the land itself, or with the oversoul of the community, however you want to term it. It's part of a conversation. But you cannot impose it upon something that is actually much, much greater than that design. So you have to be willing to let go of it. You have to be willing to evolve it. You have to know that you cannot possibly see the entirety of where you're headed. I was going to say, it's just about humility, really.
And that conversation is a present conversation. It can be, as we've gotten increasingly used to doing things through a technological intermediary, this question of how do we form and live into that evolution in the places where we are in person in an embodied way, um,
Mhm.
is an important aspect of that. No.
Yeah. And to be able to, this tapping into the larger design, how does that actually happen? That happens through communication. That happens through intimacy. Because how do you know whether it's working or what's not working? It's because other people, the experience of others is visible to you. And if you are unwilling to take in the experience of other people and instead projecting some kind of diagnosis upon them, then you will not be tuned in to your participation in that greater design that wants to happen. So again, it comes down again to our social and also ecological relationships. Same thing. Like only through close observation of the natural beings around you can you understand the effect of your initial attempt at design. So this is it's about, yeah, intimacy, communication, letting go of our projections upon the world, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, allowing ourselves to be seen as well. This is that, and that's another reason why the social regeneration that you're talking about is indispensable to achieve any other kind of regeneration.
Well, thank you so much. That's yeah. I think that really ties up so many of these aspects that we've been talking about. Are there any sort of closing thoughts or pieces that have come up for you that you'd like to close with?
Um, Maybe I'll just say to those people who are living in eco villages, um, just to validate how lucky you are, how blessed you are, and how precious the people and other beings around you are. That this particular gathering of human and non human beings has never happened before and will never happen again. And so, this unique moment in space time is a gift. And if you hold or even just touch that gratitude from time to time, it'll help keep you honest.
Thank you. And I just really want to acknowledge the gift that your presence, both in person and in line, has been for us these last several years. And it's really been an honor and a pleasure to speak to you today, but also be in relationship with you and feel you as a part of our wider Ecovillage community in these years of growth and challenge. And I hope we'll continue to keep that relationship alive. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Evan.